Today I am speaking with the journalist Jeremey Loffredo. Jeremey is an independent journalist who has written investigative reports for various news agencies, including Drop Site News and The Gray Zone. He produces documentaries examining issues of economic unrest and war. He also has his own Substack where he posts both his articles and his video documentaries. Jeremey's work is widely known. However, his profile went viral after he was arrested and detained in Israel for reporting on Iran's Operation True Promise 2 back in October of 2024. He was held in solitary confinement and held as a prisoner in Israel for 2 weeks before he was allowed to return to the United States. He joins us now to discuss his reporting on Gaza, Beirut in Lebanon, and tells us what he thinks might happen next in the region. Jeremey, I wanted to get your analysis on what's happening currently in Gaza and just the overall collapse of support for Zionism here in the United States.
Yeah, sure. In Gaza, it's only gotten worse and worse. And in America, support, at the same time as that has also gotten lower and lower. And I don't think we've ever seen a time in America where support for Israel was truly, you're in the minority, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. And here in New York City, this is of course it's a more liberal city, but this is the biggest city and the biggest empire in the world. And even here, you don't see. You have your pro-Israel demonstrations. 10 people show up, and this is the most Jewish people in the entire world, other than in Israel. And even here, it just feels so obvious what's going on, and it can't continue for much longer. I feel like you see how undemocratic the United States is when you have politician after politician doing the exact opposite of what their constituents who elected them. They're supposed to represent their constituents. And, you see this locally happening, and also you see it happening nationally. You have, somewhere around 70% of politicians' constituents being against sending more arms to Israel, against what Israel's doing, against the war, against the genocide. And the politician, like clockwork, they're all the same. They say, well, what happened on October 7th? It was horrible, and so Israel has the right to defend itself. And local politicians, these are senators, representatives, and then also Donald Trump. I think in America, the entire country, you have less than 50% support for Israel, yet you see him acting like it's somewhere around 90, as if he has a mandate to support Israel, a democratic mandate. And so the mask comes off in times like this, where so many people, so much of the majority want something. They want their representatives or their president or what have you to take a stance against Israel or stop what's happening. And the politicians, their elected representatives, do not listen to their constituents, one after another. And it shows you just how undemocratic the United States is in times like this.
So after October 7th, you traveled to Israel and you went around the West Bank documenting Israel's crackdown on Palestinians. You also visited the border between Israel and Gaza. You went to the checkpoint. You produced a documentary for The Gray Zone where you interviewed these settlers. Can you talk to us about what these settlers were doing at the border and just some of the lessons that you took away from that experience?
Sure. So it was last October. No, it was last March. That's when it was. Last March, I went to Israel, and I saw that there were settlers and Israeli civilians, or whatever you want to call them, going from Jerusalem and Haifa and Tel Aviv and traveling, hundreds of kilometers to the Karim Shalom and the Nitzana border crossings in the very south of Israel. And they were blocking humanitarian aid that was, much needed in Gaza. And they were blocking the aid. And this is before it was Israeli policy, to not allow aid in. So at this point, the government of Israel would say, "Oh, these are extremists. These don't represent, Israel. We want to get the aid in, but these fanatics, these settlers at the border won't allow us." And so they were trying to paint it as like a fringe movement. And so I took this bus that would leave from Jerusalem filled with Israelis, and it would stop in all of the illegal settlements in the West Bank, and it would make its way south and bring these settlers to the border. And as soon as they would get to the border, as soon as this is a closed military zone, they would call it. So as soon as civilians or anyone who's not military is in this zone, then the military would use the presence of these Israelis as justification for shutting down the border crossing. So they were kind of like the proxies of the Israeli government, because the Israeli government couldn't, at that point, they weren't willing to say we don't want to let aid in. So they had to allow their civilians to force them to close these aid checkpoints. And so I would travel with these people. We would go to the border, and I would talk to them, and they would tell me, they would say, listen, our government, they can't not allow aid in right now. The entire world would be against us. So we're not asking the government for anything. We're here to get this border shut down. We don't need anything from the government. We're doing this ourselves. We're here to do. And they would give, the Israeli military would give these settlers sandwiches, ice cream, water, and just kind of as an invitation to please stay all day so we can keep this aid border crossing closed throughout the day. Come back tomorrow. We happily give you all the snacks and refreshments you need. So it was really a collaborative effort between the military and the settlers. And I was interviewing all the people who were there, and I would interview, these are reservists that were in Gaza. Now they're here blocking the aid. And they would very matter-of-factly tell me how when they were when they were in Gaza, they were dealing with explosions, and they were dealing with, systematically destroying offices and homes. And they wouldn't even give the pretext that we hear from the Zionist propagandists that, like, no, that wasn't a UN building, that was a terrorist facility. They would tell me, oh yeah, no, this was a UN office that was in charge of helping families who needed food. Like they weren't putting the propaganda pretext on anything. They were very proud of what they did. And I would say, what do you want to do when by the time this war ends? What's your goal? And they say, well, we want to Judaize the Gaza Strip. We want to make it Jewish. We can't live. They say we can't live next to terrorists. We need to make it Jewish. So they were very serious about and straightforward with me about their goals. And those were not the goals, at least what we would hear from the Israeli government at that point. And now the Israeli government is all those things that the settlers were doing at the border, blocking the aid, saying we want to Judaize Gaza. That's the policy line for them.
There was one clip in particular where I think you were interviewing a teenage girl, and she said straight up something along the lines of, I want to kill Palestinians. They're not humans. Is that something that was consistent, like across the people, that you spoke to? Were they all just genocidal?
Yes, certainly. I would say a majority, maybe 60 or 70% of them were, we don't want them to be here. They can die. They can starve to death, and pay for the things that they did on October 7th. That was effectively the entire vibe of the entire group of people. And they would say these things. They would bring popcorn machines and grills to the border with Gaza and play music and bring balls and bring their babies and bring their machine guns. And it was a big, you could see photos. It was like a festival. It was like a feast that they would have right here on the border crossing. And the presence of them was used by the IDF to shut down the aid crossing. So it was kind of a win-win. They have a wonderful party, and they also stop the aid from getting into Gaza.
So for a long time, we've been witnessing all kinds of grotesque videos coming out of Gaza. This genocide is essentially live streamed. We've seen people burnt to death live on camera. We've seen heads blown out. We've seen so many babies decapitated, killed, lost limbs, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, there was outrage, but it was never enough to produce enough pressure to get the Israelis to either slow down or stop. What is it about the starvation of Gaza that is just a step too far for people in the West? Why is it that politicians will finally come out and say, okay, we need to let aid into Gaza, where before, when it was just bombs dropping and killing babies, it wasn't enough?
I think the idea of letting food into Gaza is just enough detached from American policymakers, where like they are directly responsible for sending the weapons. They're directly responsible for sending the bombs, directly responsible for signing the legislation that sends more weapons to Israel. But they can say, I call on the Israeli government to let aid in. I call on the Israeli government to stop starving Palestinians. But they couldn't call on the Israeli government to stop dropping bombs on the Palestinians because it was themselves who sent them the bombs. So I think the starvation is just enough removed from the actual policymakers in America who are signing the legislation and voting that they feel that they can criticize the Israeli government without, incriminating themselves.
So keep killing them, just feed them as you do so.
Exactly.
That's kind of their idea. So, uh, Jeremy, when you went to Israel several times, you arrived last year on the eve or on the night of Iran's Operation True Promise 2, which
Mm-hmm.
was their second attack on Israel in October of 2024. And it was in retaliation for the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the decapitation of Hezbollah leadership, and the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, which took place at an IRGC compound in Tehran. So finally, Iran was pushed to the edge and they were forced to retaliate. You, like many other journalists, upon your arrival, documented the attack, and you were then arrested and detained by the Israelis and held in solitary confinement, even though you committed no crime. You're a journalist doing your job and you're an American citizen. But they arrested you and they charged you with aiding the enemy. And the punishment for that is life in prison and potentially death. So, can you talk to us about your experience, what it was like being detained, why you were detained, how long you were detained for, and how ultimately you were released?
Sure. So yeah, I arrived on October 1st, and my plan for this reporting trip to Palestine was to do two things. It was to document sort of the uptick in military violence and raids that were happening in Jenin at the time. Jenin was in the middle of it was a 10-day siege. There wasn't food going in and out. Everyone had to stay in their homes. They shut off the water. It was really bad in Jenin. And so my plan was to go to Jenin and talk to the people there and document what was happening there. And as soon as I arrived, the missile sirens started going off in Jerusalem, and I was at a cafe, and there was Israelis showing each other, passing around cell phones, looking at the map that shows where all the missiles and all the sirens are going off. And the map was all of Israel. It was every siren that was in Israel was going off. And I looked up, and it looked like fireworks were in the sky. There were so many ballistic missiles. There was videos online of Palestinians in the West Bank and even in Gaza, cheering because it looked like finally someone was standing up for them. And it ended. And thankfully, I was in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was like rarely targeted in any of these attacks because it's so close to Alaska, and it's so close to the West Bank. There's not a lot of missiles that fall in Jerusalem, so I was fine. But of course, the Israelis, playing victim, they're hiding under benches, they're hiding inside. But the next day, I was planning to go to Jenin, and I spoke to Max Blumenthal, and he said, I think this is really newsworthy. You're there. What are the chances? You should look around and see if you can find any missile impact sites. You should see what's going on. He sent me a video by PBS NewsHour of Nick Schifrin, who was in front of the Mossad headquarters, and there was a giant crater. And he said, there's definitely missile impacts, so you should try to find them. I said, I think that sounds like a great idea. I spent the next few days driving around the Negev desert with a driver, talking to Bedouin tribes, Bedouin community, like they were saying what they heard, what they saw, where they were hiding. We were around Nevatim Air Base, which was a giant target for Iran. And I also went to Tel Aviv, and I went to look for craters there. And I found the one in front of the Mossad headquarters. I showed how close it was to actually hitting the intelligence building. I published the report, and I went on my way. And a couple days later, I was at a checkpoint in Nablus on my way north to Jenin. And I handed over my passport to one of the IDF soldiers, and they looked at it, and they took me out of the car. They shackled me. They blindfolded me. They handcuffed me, and they threw me in the back of like an IDF Humvee. They drove me to a military compound in the West Bank, maybe 15 kilometers from Jerusalem. And I was in holding for a while. And then finally, they told me that someone was on the phone for me. I answered the phone. It was a lawyer, and the lawyer said, "Listen, Mr. Loffredo, you're being charged with giving information to the enemy during wartime. This is a very serious offense. They're going to take you to prison right now, and I'll probably see you in court in the coming days." And I had no idea what any of this was about. I had no idea what this was about. They put me back in holding, and from the prison cell, I can hear them listening to my report. I hear my own voice through the wall of the building, and so I'm getting a little more. I'm like, okay, this is about my video, but I didn't go anywhere that was off limits. I didn't go to any closed military zones. I didn't go anywhere sensitive. I was just in the desert, and I was in Tel Aviv. So they bring me to the Russian compound, which is a prison in Jerusalem for security detainees. It's almost entirely Palestinian. They put me in solitary confinement. I was given maybe a Dixie cup of water, no food, for a few days. And during that few days, I would be allowed out for maybe 20 minutes to sit in front of a judge. And I don't speak Hebrew. And so my entire hearing would take place in Hebrew. And they'd be looking at me. I wouldn't know what anyone was saying. And they were essentially accusing me of taking videos and photographs and information in my report that endangers Israeli national security. More specifically, it was like I showed where a few of the missile impact sites were, and they said Iran or their enemies could look at these videos and hone in and be more specific and be more accurate next time when they target Israel. And so I was facing, it was 25 years in prison or the death penalty. Thankfully, one day during my hearing, an Israeli journalist came to the hearing, and this Israeli journalist works for Ynet. He's a Zionist. He's an Israeli. He's not even left wing, but he saw what was happening to me in the news, and he said, "I published almost an identical report to Mr. Loffredo, and I actually went through the Israeli military censor here on WhatsApp or Telegram, and they told me that there was nothing secret in my report, but Mr. Loffredo is being charged as a terrorist." And so the Israeli authorities, which they were intelligence officials who were the prosecutors essentially. So it was intelligence officials arguing with my lawyer and me not being able to speak. And the intelligence official said, yeah, they might have allowed you to publish your report, but the information we have on Mr. Loffredo is top secret, and we can't share it with the court right now. And thankfully, the judge was kind of like, I mean, you got to tell me something. Like we have an American here, and you're trying to put him away for life. Like you got to tell me at least a little bit of what Mr. Loffredo is guilty of, other than the publishing the report that other Israeli journalists were allowed to publish. And the security intelligence officials didn't tell the judge anything. And I went back to prison for a couple of days. And finally, on the fourth day, they couldn't find anything that I'd done that was actually illegal. They let me go under the condition that over the next 2 weeks, I give my passport, they keep my computer, they keep my phone. And over the next 2 weeks, whenever I get called in for interrogation, I have to bring myself to the West Bank military compound to be interrogated. So I had to stay in Jerusalem during this time. And I was interrogated for, it was 3 times. I was interrogated. Some days it was twice. It was like 6 or 7 hours. It would be from sunup to sundown. And then one time it was just for maybe like an hour or two. And
what kind of questions were they asking you during the interrogation?
Mm-hmm. They were asking me everything from, are you familiar with the military censor in Israel? Do you know what it does? I would say I've heard of it. I'm not super familiar. They would say, you went to journalism school, you went to university, you took classes, you had professors. Surely you understand the importance of a military censor. And I was like, I mean, I don't mean to be rude or like I'm not being facetious, but in America, like we have the First Amendment. There are no there's no formal military censor where I'm from. And they would ask me, do you love Israel? do you love Israel? And I would say I'm an American. Israel's just it's another country. I don't know. And they would say, what do you think about October 7th? And I would say I'm an American. I'm here, covering what's going on the West Bank or what's going on at the border. Like, it's not really what I'm here to report on. I wasn't arguing with them. I'm being interrogated while I'm still shackled. Like, the power dynamic is like, I don't know if I'm being let out yet. I still know that they're going through my phone and going through my laptop. And I'm wondering what they will consider, illegal or not illegal. Because
did they ask you, sorry to interrupt, did they ask you to unlock your phone and your laptop?
In court, while I'm still in solitary confinement, the reason that they asked me, they kept asking for the judge to keep me in solitary confinement for, I believe it was 10 days. And I mean, and even one day feels like an eternity. So like 10 days, I couldn't even imagine. And their reasoning was, we will soon be able to break into his phone and his laptop, and we need him to stay in prison until then, because we don't know what who he's talking to, what he's capable of. So he needs to stay in custody until then. And then I'm in one of my interrogations post-release. They hand me my cell phone and they say, unlock the phone. And I accidentally put in the wrong passcode. I put it in like backwards or something. It wasn't on purpose. And my phone locked for like 15 minutes, which is like only something that happens, of course, if you have an iPhone, that only happens after like 4 or 5 failed tries of putting in the passcode.
Yeah.
So I put in the passcode and it says lock for 20 minutes. I hand it back to them. I say, you guys were trying to get into the phone. You couldn't get in. And they're like, no. And they, they act like they don't speak English, but I know they understand me. Cause there was a translator with me the entire time. So it locks and he leaves the room. He comes back and he just wants to see, and I guess I do need to explain this. I'm telling them that they keep asking me how I found this crater outside the Mossad headquarters. And I keep telling them I saw the Nick Schifrin video on PBS NewsHour, and I saw, what was around him. Because the Mossad headquarters, the actual address of this building is not public. And so I just used, visual markers that were in his video, other videos from Tel Aviv of missiles coming down, ended up finding it. And I kept telling him about this PBS NewsHour video, and they would mock me. They would say, PBS NewsHour, like that, because I kept repeating it. And I was telling them it's an important video for them to see if they want to understand how I found it. And so they wanted me to unlock the phone and go through my messages with Max Blumenthal, because Max sent me the tweet that Nick Schifrin published on the night of October 1st. And I said, listen, there's a video that you guys can see. Like, it's just, just Google it, find it. And they thought I was lying, to the point where they wanted me to unlock my phone and show them my messages and show them the tweet. And it seemed like even they, and this gets into kind of how strange the censorship regime in Israel is, that it seemed like even these intelligence officers in the West Bank, in their offices, were censored from seeing the video that I was talking about. I think like the censorship office, kind of just covers their own ass by making sure that people who get them in trouble by not censoring the wrong things can't see anything. So it's like, problem solved. So they couldn't find the video, apparently. So I finally gave him my phone, and I'm nervous because, I'm giving, I'm PayPaling people in Gaza for, money, for aid, for food. I have, tons of tweets that maybe they would consider, support for terrorism. I don't know. So I don't know what they would consider, because there's nothing I know that's illegal on my phone, but I don't know what they're going to consider illegal. So I'm nervous for them to be looking through my phone. So goes to this thing. I click on the Max Blumenthal tweet, the text. It brings us to the tweet, the Nick Schifrin tweet, and I click on it, and it says content unavailable. When I watched this video in my lawyer's office in Jerusalem, maybe an hour before. So it's kind of proof to me in that moment that they can't see the video I'm talking about, that everyone else can see. And so they think I'm I'm communicating with Hezbollah or Iran on, where the missile site, where the, these missile impact sites were. So he saw that it said content unavailable, and he kind of looked at me, and he took a video on his own phone of my phone showing that it's unavailable. And I was interrogated more of what I thought about Israel, what I thought about Gaza, and this and that. And then after that, I was told to go home. They kept my phone, they kept my laptop, they still had my passport. Maybe 5 more days pass, and my lawyer gets a call from the one of the intelligence officers and says, tell Mr. Loffredo to book a flight out of Israel and then send us the confirmation of that flight. And I booked a flight really fast and we sent them the confirmation, and then they went incommunicado. We've not heard from them since. They call it an informal deportation, where it's like they don't want to face the political ramifications of deporting a journalist. And so they just quietly tell the lawyer to tell me to leave, and they leave my case open to dissuade me from ever returning. So it's like an informal deportation, informal do not enter order for the state of Israel, but everything's under the books.
So they kept your phone and your laptop then?
Oh, I gave a friend of mine like power of attorney because they didn't want me to go back to the this compound in the West Bank without being told that I had to, because who knows what would happen once I arrive. So I sent someone to go get my things once I was told that I can book a flight. And I was like, if they give me the things back, that's it. That's like a green light. Like I can get out of here. And they hand over my laptop, my phone, my passport, and they get it all back. And the next day I get out of there. And my laptop was I opened it. I had an entirely different username for my user on my MacBook. It used to say J, and then now it said Jeremey Loffredo. My phone signal was going in and out for the entirety of until I got back to the U.S. I got a new MacBook. I got a new phone. And,
okay, I was gonna ask. Yeah,
we're not talking on a compromised device.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad you got out. I can't imagine what solitary confinement was like. No ability to communicate. I think I heard you tell Max in an interview that you could hear the wailing of people who were being tortured at the prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in solitary confinement, and I could hear screaming and crying, only to be interrupted every few seconds with Hebrew demands or screams or yells, like clearly a guard torturing a Palestinian. It seemed like the cell next to mine. I couldn't see anything, of course, but that was obviously it's the scariest thing in the world. And you think, it's psychological torture. They do this on purpose. If you look at Adamir, which is a prisoner rights organization out of Ramallah, that is a tactic that they use in Israeli prisons before they interrogate another prisoner. So they subject a prisoner to the sounds of torture before they interrogate the next prisoner, to make them more scared and think that they're next, and this and that. So, and that's exactly how it happened. As soon as the sounds and the wailing and the crying and the screaming and the yelling stopped, two plainclothes intelligence officers opened my cell, took me out, put me in an unmarked car, and drove me out to the West Bank for interrogation at 10 p.m. So it wasn't a formal tomorrow at 4 p.m. we're gonna ask you some questions. It was right as you're going to sleep, we're gonna subject you to the screams of another prisoner, and then we're gonna take you out of your cell, shackle you, put you in an unmarked car, and drive you out to the West Bank in the middle of the night. So it wasn't until I got back that I read about on Adamir that something like 40% of security detainees in Israeli prisons are subjected to the screams of their fellow prisoners before their own interrogation. This is a very well-known tactic.
So, Jeremy, I want to ask you, you're Jewish, correct?
I'm my mother, who passed away recently. She was Jewish. She wasn't religious, but her parents were Jewish. So technically I'm ethnically Jewish, and compared to Israelis, I'm Jewish. But I was baptized, and I went to church, I went to Sunday school, and my father's Catholic, and I was raised Catholic.
I'm very sorry to hear about the loss of your mother. I hope she rests in peace.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, because I was wondering because I like to ask Jews about their perspective growing up, how they broke free from Zionism. So I don't know if you were raised or if you ever grew up around Zionists, perhaps at a synagogue or just conversations with family members, but it doesn't sound like that was the case for you.
Oh no, yeah, I wasn't introduced to Zionism at a young age. I went to public school in New Jersey. My mother's side of my family, it was they're very unserious. They're Jewish by name only, but I was never subjected to any of the religion. But I will say, even the first time I went to the West Bank, it was maybe 2 weeks after October 7th. I was in Taipei, which is a Christian village in the West Bank, and I posted a video of some man in Taipei talking about how the settlers, they throw fire bombs on his house. They steal his car. They take his goats. They cut down his olive trees. All of these things. And my uncle, who's it's my mother's side, sent it to me. And like he's very he's not educated on the subject, but he said to me, he said the Jews were there first, and it's like these settlers that live on the outskirts of Taipei, they're from France. They came here like 10 years ago. So like, and these are Christians. So like this idea that this blanket statement, like the Jews were there first, that we hear repeated ad nauseum, it's like some of these settlers are from America and from Europe, and they got here 6 months ago. They got here 10 years ago. And these communities of Muslims and Christians in the West Bank have been there for generations. So these blanket statements like Jews were there first, when some of these Jewish settlers in the West Bank got there, a matter of years ago, did not grow up there, et cetera, et cetera. It's such a hollow comeback.
So before we transition to your reporting in Lebanon, I want to ask you quickly what your assessment is of the current situation. Which direction do you think this is heading in? Because Netanyahu obviously has stated that their plan is to continue with this assault on Gaza. Now we're hearing it plainly and openly from government officials like Bezalel Smotrich that their objective is to completely occupy Gaza, annex Gaza, take it for themselves, the Judification of the Gaza Strip. Do you think they'll succeed in this goal? Do you think they'll be able to dump the Palestinians into Egypt and other countries around the world? What do you think happens next?
I don't want to make any predictions, but being in Israel from after October 7th up until 9 months ago when I was detained, I don't see Israeli society allowing the genocide to stop, allowing Netanyahu or Smotrich or anyone to say, okay, we're done now. We're not going to occupy the strip. Like the entire goal for at least the very strong right-wing bloc in Israel that votes, they vote as a bloc. They're the most politically powerful group. They want to occupy Gaza. They want to live in Gaza. And I think there will be a civil war in Israel if any part of the Israeli government bends a knee to sort of the international community that is asking them nicely to stop.
Interesting. So you recently returned a couple weeks ago from Lebanon. You were in Beirut. Can you tell me why you wanted to visit Beirut and what the objective of your reporting was?
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to visit. I wanted to go to Lebanon because, plainly, to be honest, I was because I'm not allowed to go back to Palestine. So I was like, how can I want to report on Israeli crimes during this war, but I can't go to Palestine. And I saw that they're still occupying 5 strategic hilltop positions in southern Lebanon, bombing every day, drone strikes, sound grenades, sniper fire. Like they are occupying southern Lebanon, and they are attacking it every day. And every now and then they attack the biggest city, biggest metropolitan area in Lebanon, which is Beirut. And so I was like, okay, if I can't report on their crimes in Palestine, I'm going to go to Lebanon. And that's what I did. I was in the south for half the time, and then I was in Dahieh for the other half.
So you were, I think, 1,000 meters away from Israeli occupied positions. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was 1,000 meters away from Israeli occupied positions, but it's important to note, like, it wasn't that I was dangerously close. It's that they call them strategic positions because they're 1,000 meters away from so many towns. I mean, they're on hilltops, and all these towns are below. So if you go to any town in southern Lebanon, chances are you are within, sniper fire distance from an Israeli position, a hilltop position. So like all of these towns, dozens of towns, you can look on the hilltops and see Israeli Humvees, newly erected fences, satellite towers. So I was only 1,000 miles away because I just was in southern Lebanon. 1,000 meters away.
So what was your takeaway from the reporting you did? I saw that you interviewed children, people whose homes were just destroyed in the Dahieh district. And if you could explain for the audience who aren't familiar what exactly the Dahieh suburb or district is in Beirut.
Sure, yeah. So Dahieh is like it's a part of Beirut that they largely support Hezbollah, and because of that, Israel, in sort of a collective punishment type way, targets Beirut, that part of Beirut constantly. Dahieh, they target it constantly, and in a way. They use the presence of weapons as a justification, but it's really just to try to get the people of Dahe to stop supporting the resistance, to stop supporting Hezbollah, because the reasoning is if you didn't support Hezbollah, if you didn't support the resistance, your house wouldn't be getting bombed right now. And the other half of Beirut is fine as could be. They're not targeted, they're not under bombardment, and a lot of the people in Lebanon were telling me it's such a propaganda win for the international news media and for Israel that, like, in 2006, you had this war talking about Lebanon versus Israel. And now, anytime it's spoken about in the media or by Israel, it's Israel versus Hezbollah. So you don't have the same international support or even support in the region for what's going on in Lebanon, because it's not spoken about like a war on the people. It's spoken about a war against the political group Hezbollah.
So, Jeremy, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. If you could just lastly explain to us like what your motivation is for being a journalist and doing the work that you do, and where people can find your work.
My motivation for being a journalist is, like, I saw one time, I can't remember exactly where, Julian Assange had written about it before. Someone did the math, and all of the wars that all of the Western media had ever supported, maybe over the past 30 years, and all the people that died in those wars, and how many journalists work for these organizations. And they came up with a number, like there's like 300 deaths per journalist they're responsible for the wars that they supported. So when I hear someone in New York or in DC or something say, "Oh, I'm a journalist," it's like hearing it's a disgusting profession. Largely, they're responsible for so much carnage and death and manufacturing consent for horrific war crimes. And my goal is to try to be the opposite of that, because that's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, well, I commend you for your efforts. So you currently, I guess you're freelance, right? So you contribute to DropSite, Gray Zone, and other sites, correct? And I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
you have your own Substack as well.
Yeah, I have a Substack, Jeremey Loffredo on Substack. It's in my bio on Twitter at Loffredo Jeremy. You can find me at either of those places.
So I'm going to post that information in the description of this video. So for the audience listening, take a look at his Substack and support his work. You can also buy him a coffee so you can support his important journalism. And given that he actually went on the front lines and got into solitary confinement, I think you could, buy him a couple of coffees. That would be good. So, Jeremy, what's next for you? What other projects do you have going on right now?
Well, I was in Lebanon for a month, and I have so much that I'm still working on getting out. I have so many towns that were under Israeli bombardment almost constantly that I spent time in. So I'm trying to put all that stuff out, all these documentaries from different parts of occupied Lebanon.
All right, Jeremy, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks again.
All right, I'll see you soon.